We've been working super hard on this project and I really hope you like it. This is the Modular Light Rig version 2 video. This rig is more refined, more modular, more capable, more configurable, and more attainable. It's just more better than version 1. If you've been following my channel from the beginning, you'll know I've been working on a version of this lighting rig for a while now, and I've been teasing this version of the rig since my first video, with the primary goal of creating a modular lighting system that is easier and faster to set up, more flexible and affordable to develop custom DIY fixtures to suit your individual needs, and refined enough to consider a somewhat marketable product, all while remaining open source. I teamed up with a couple friends in Austin, Texas with similar goals in more of the software side of things, and after learning from the shortcomings of the first prototype and taking input from the community, we've come up with something that we're really proud of. We're calling it the Pedal Modular Lighting System. Let me show you everything. The Pedal Modular Lighting System gets its name from these all-new aluminum and plastic cable spools which double as the base and socket for each light fixture. The spools have a large opening on the bottom to grab onto, which allows the spool to unravel easily as you hold it. This design is a major improvement from the original rig as it lets you keep the spools plugged in at all times, saving even more time during setup and teardown than the version 1 rig, all while maintaining that nice cable management for easy transport and ultra clean stages. Just put your rig in place, grab a spool or two, and pull them to location. Repeat until all spools are placed, and then plug your rig into power and your lights into the sockets, and you're done.
Exactly 2 minutes.
That's it.
The unusual shape of these spools, while pretty fun looking, is actually entirely functional. When I knew I wanted to go the spool route for the bases, I had to figure out how to make strong and reliable spools while keeping the costs manageable. Initially, I prototyped some fully 3D printed options, but they lacked the strength I wanted, and the time and amount of filament it took to print each spool was pretty ridiculous. I loved the idea of cutting the discs of the spools out of metal, but considering a standard spool requires 2 discs each, one for the top and one for the bottom, I started to see the cost jump dramatically. Luckily, this hand groove in the bottom of the spool gave me a unique opportunity to design both the top and bottom discs to be laser cut from one single circle, effectively cutting material costs in half. These two halves sandwich a 3D printed core, which I designed to print in 3 separate parts at 100% infill with no overhangs in the least amount of time and material possible. I was even able to use this triangular hole cutout for the socket as a support that holds the 3D printed socket in place, so I never have to worry about busting the plastic socket by jamming my fixture in too hard. This design cuts the weight down per spool, which is also important, and I'll get into that later. The pedal rig also has an all-new enclosure with this nice acrylic lid, which houses the power supply and a new pixel controller by Quinn LED called the Dig Octa system. If you haven't seen this controller before, I highly recommend checking out the designer of these Quinn LED's products on his YouTube channel for some in-depth walkthroughs. This thing is a perfect match for this pedal rig. It's a modular system with 8 standard outputs, but it's stackable, meaning you can add more fixtures or more power as needed. And of course, being a pixel controller means we can now use addressable LEDs, which opens up an entire new world of looks and effects for all your lighting needs. I'll get more into controlling these later on in the video. As Tesla has recently changed from 12 volts to 48 volts for the inside of their new Cybertruck, we opted to move from 12 volts to 24 volts for these same reasons, to reduce the current and allow for thinner cables all around, lowering the cost and weight of the entire system. I was able to find a good amount of 24-volt WS2811 addressable LEDs on Amazon, which only require 3 conductor cables instead of the 4 conductor cables needed for the analog LED strips I was using in the version 1 rig. But I actually opted to wire this rig with 4 conductor cables anyways, just in case I ever wanted to hook up the analog DMX decoder to use my version 1 fixtures on this rig. This extra conductor also gives me the option to use 4-pin addressable LEDs in the future if I ever need to. Sometimes when a design gets more refined, it can lose some of its flexibility. I wanted to make sure that despite having these new metal components, this rig would actually be more modular than the original rig. These spools have a new 3D printed version of the original socket I used in version 1, with an added slot for a 5th pin to be used as an indexing pin for a 5th conductor if needed. But the socket hole here is big enough to accommodate most NEMA L14 twist lock connectors, as I know some of you wanted to use more of an off-the-shelf solution for the socket. And if there are other off-the-shelf sockets that you might want to use instead of my socket design, it should be fairly easy to design and print a support for most other connectors you can think of. For the enclosure, I added large holes on either side which allow for an interchangeable connector panel, which allows you to configure which cable connectors you want to use and where to place them. For this rig I have here, I used 4 16mm aviation connectors on either side of the spool for the connections. And I placed my power and Ethernet ports on the top, as I will be using this rig inside of a case, so I don't have to remove the enclosure from the case to access them. But you could easily replace the aviation connectors for NL4 connectors or 4-pin XLRs and position the power and data cables on the back for a more standard configuration. If you recently built a rig after seeing the original video, you can simply use your current analog DMX decoder in lieu of the pixel controller, which will allow you to continue to use your version 1 analog fixtures while gaining the benefits of having the new spool bases and overall form factor of the pedal rig, and will make for an easy upgrade to the pixel version when you're ready. Additionally, I'm currently working on designing some adapters to make the rig even more flexible and capable of using 12-volt or even 5-volt LEDs despite running on a 24-volt infrastructure, as well as a module that will let you control analog LEDs with this pixel controller, but that will have to wait for another video. To understand the huge improvement in capabilities of controlling this system, I need to explain the drawbacks of the original analog system. The rig in my previous videos, which I will refer to as the analog rig, used analog LEDs, which meant you could control the color and brightness of each entire fixture, kind of like this. But with the new pixel LEDs, each fixture can be further broken up into individual segments, allowing for way more dynamics and motion in your light show. The analog rig also requires some sort of hardwired DMX signal input in order to properly control them. The analog rig's DMX decoder does have some standalone modes which allow you to set solid colors or cycle through colors, but in order to properly control the system, the rig has to be connected to either a DMX lighting console or a DMX device like this DMX's box hooked up to your computer. Now the pedal rig with the new pixel controller that comes pre-flashed with WLED allows you to have very detailed control wirelessly through an app on your phone or computer. The pixel controller has its own access points, so you don't even need any internet to use this, but it can be connected to your local Wi-Fi so you can control multiple pedal rigs simultaneously over multiple devices. I won't go too in-depth into WLED in this video, but I may make some videos in the future about this, as the capabilities just with this application alongside the pedal rig are very impressive. But WLED alone does lack the ability to program full-on music sync light shows, so we had to come up with a solution for that. Now the one positive to controlling the analog rig is that an 8-fixture system only requires 3 DMX channels per fixture, meaning the entire rig only takes up 24 channels. And if you know some basic DMX, that's just a small portion of the 512 channels available per universe. I would simply use my DMX's box, which is now discontinued and limits a user to one single DMX universe, to individually program each of the 24 channels within Ableton Live along my backing tracks until I had a light show. Now, in comparison, the new Pixel rig with 8 of these smaller 3-foot fixtures, which have 17 individual segments per fixture, with each segment taking up 3 DMX channels, you could sort of visualize each segment as being equivalent to one of the 8 analog fixtures. We're already taking up 54 channels per fixture, or 432 channels of DMX for all 8 fixtures. Now this is still within the 512 DMX channels per universe, however these fixtures are on the smaller end of what's possible with this system, and you could theoretically run a combination of fixtures that would far exceed the channels of even multiple DMX universes. So long story short, programming these lights becomes a lot less simple, and you can't just automate every channel individually. In fact, this is partly the reason I avoided pixel LEDs in my original build. So this is where my friends Andrew and Austin come into the picture. Andrew reached out to me after seeing my first video to fill me in on a project him and Austin have been working on. Andrew currently runs a lighting and sound company in Texas, and Austin is an electrical engineer. Together, they have been developing a software tool that works inside the free version of a very versatile media control software called Touch Designer. This free tool allows for easy code-free programming of pixel fixtures via ArtNet that can handle seemingly unlimited DMX channels and universes. And because it is built within the Touch Designer framework, you are not limited to just DMX. They are also working on incorporating control for standard DMX light fixtures, lasers, projectors, TVs, pretty much any visual tool you can think of. Touch Designer officially supports linking with Ableton, meaning you can still program highly granular shows that sync up perfectly with your band's backing tracks or click track. But where this system really shines is in its ability to use media files layered with built-in effects, and even take audio, MIDI, and other inputs to generate super detailed and responsive scenes quickly and automatically, meaning you can have shows that react directly and accurately to the music you are feeding it. If you're a DJ or a live band that doesn't use any tracks, this will change your live shows without having to painstakingly program each individual second of your show. And for you film guys out there, you can do things like upload a video of a real fire, for example, that accurately pops and crackles with the fire's audio to create the most realistic fire lighting in your scene. This is just one example of what's possible, but the use cases are endless. Another feature of the tool Andrew and Austin are working on is the built-in 3D stage model, which allows you to virtually orient and visualize your light rig so you can program your shows all on your computer without having to set up any lights. Unlike the analog rig, which needed to be set up whenever I had to program or make any changes to the light show. Aside from this software, Andrew and Austin have been developing some hardware of their own, including their own configuration of the version 2 rig, a portable media computer, interactive input devices, and even some holographic light fixtures. While my version 2 rig is the flagship lighting rig for this system, this is really just the beginning of our journey to bring unbelievable open source lighting and visual arts into the music and video industry. I find lighting gear kind of boring. Obviously, the only part of the lighting gear that needs to be cool is the actual light or effect that it emits, but I feel like all the lighting products from all the different lighting companies out there kind of look the same. As a musician, I always took pride in having gear that inspired me creatively, and instrument companies clearly understand this. Guitars, for example, are practically pieces of art, and I think every musician appreciates having an instrument that looks as good as it sounds. Even a lot of film gear companies out there are now putting a ton of effort into making their products with style, and it just makes the rig so much more fun to use and configure. So I wanted to have a little bit of fun with this rig, specifically in the different configurations.
Choose your configuration.
This is the Fly rig, and I chose to build my rig in this configuration because it's built to travel. It's a fine balance between heavy duty and portable by being small enough and light enough to fit into this flight case, which is under 62 linear inches and altogether just under 50 pounds, meaning you can check it as regular sized luggage and avoid those nasty oversized fees on most airlines. It has a decent 360 watt 24 volt power supply with enough juice for a healthy range of large fixtures, and an 8-channel distro to separately power and control 8 individual fixtures. And it's black because it's stealthy. Like a plane, I guess. But say you needed something a bit beefier. Perhaps the power rig is a better fit. This rig adds chunkier cables with the much sturdier twist lock NL4 connectors instead of the aviation connectors, and NEMA L14 sockets in lieu of the standard socket. A 480 watt power supply capable of powering small LED walls and entire room installations, and with a scuffed raw aluminum finish, you can feel less precious about scratches, and you can really start treating this thing like a tool. But the power rig isn't perfect. It's heavy and uses much more expensive parts, so the Porta rig may suit you better. With only 4 spools and 4 standard cables, since not every fixture needs a spool, it has a rail system so you can carry the rig constantly plugged in without requiring an entire hard case. And there are unlimited potential configurations, such as the Cine rig, which uses a 400 watt fanless power supply for completely silent operation. or the big range, which has taller spools allowing for much longer lengths of thick cable for those who need to space fixtures further apart. How about the vintage, with an analog DMX decoder instead of a pixel controller if you want the more universal DMX control and analog LED fixtures. Sweet 16, which uses the Quinn LED Dig Octa's modular system to expand the output from 8 to 16 individual fixtures, and thus 16 spools. I think we're going to make an official configurations page on the website so you can post your configurations, and perhaps some of the best ones can be made official configurations in the roster, but they have to have cool names. This is one of the original tube fixtures from my first video. These were a big hit, so naturally I've iterated on this design to offer a few new features while keeping true to this tubular form factor. But I also put together a couple other styles of fixtures to show you just how capable this rig can be. I've got all the new fixtures set up behind me, and I'll go through each of them for you now. The Tele 17s are 3-foot tubes with 17 individual LED segments per fixture. Each fixture comes with its own optional 3-foot riser that telescopically slides over the light fixture to double as a durable case for safe transport. This fixture uses skinnier T8 tube guards as opposed to the T12 tube guards I used in the version 1 fixtures. Since the new LEDs I'm using in this rig are so dense, they don't require the same level of diffusion in the form of the T12 guards. In fact, these new WS2811 LEDs, called cob strips, are practically seamless already, so I didn't even need to use parchment paper for diffusion, and instead just opted to sand the tubes down to this matte finish. The Stacker 12s are similar to the version 1 light tubes with their larger T12 form factor, but these fixtures are broken into 2-foot stackable sections with 12 LED segments each, which allow you to break the tube down for easier travel and shipping. And then they can be assembled into impressively large fixtures like this 10-foot tube I have here. They connect via a rail system using thumb screws and currently need to be plugged in individually, as this is still a proof of concept, but I intend to design the rail system to incorporate the electrical connection directly, and perhaps to allow for angled connections for some more interesting shapes. The Cinepan 30s are Betty Crocker cake pans I bought from the dollar store, lined with 30 segments of CCT addressable WS2811 LEDs, with a greater than 90 Cree value for decently accurate color temperatures from 3000 to 6000 Kelvin, inspired by Daniel Schiffer's video about his DIY cake pan film lights. I just slapped these fixtures together and actually used them throughout the making of this video. I tried one pan with the LEDs flat on the back of the pan and one with the LEDs wrapped around the inner edge, and I think the edge-lit ones work better for general lighting purposes, but the direct light from the other option, along with the addressable nature of the LEDs, has some interesting effects too. I just added aviation sockets to these and used the cables from my original rig from the light to the enclosure, instead of using the spool sockets. I also designed a simple magnetic filter system which allows you to swap out different diffusion layers so you can get your film lights looking just right. I'm just starting to see the real benefits of using these lights in a cinematography setting, as I can run fixtures for both practical lighting and key and fill lighting, for example, and I plan on focusing a lot on this aspect of the rig moving forward, especially as I continue making videos for this YouTube channel. I wanted to show off a more customizable option for those of you that want something more unique than the typical tube lights, and with this flexible LED neon, you can very quickly build custom neon-looking fixtures that function exactly the same as the tubes. I opted to build the pedal logo here, but you could do your logo, letters, basic pictures, and just like the rest of this rig, the options are endless. So aside from the metal parts of the spools, this rig is actually super DIY friendly, and similarly priced to the version 1 rig. And we wanted to make it as easy as possible for you to build your own, which is why we were initially planning to produce the metal spool discs for purchase on our new website, pedallighting.com, where we will also be making all the 3D print files and detailed build documentation, as well as a beta version of the software available to download. Ultimately, we'd love to sell entire build kits that come with everything you need to build the full rig without requiring any special tools. But as we ramp up to that, we're going to start by selling just the spool parts, since the rest of the parts can be easily sourced online. I have the links for these parts down in the description, but we will have a frequently updated list on the pedal lighting website as well. While we are still finalizing our manufacturing, we have put up a small market survey to basically get an idea of how many of you might be interested in purchasing the spool parts versus waiting for the full kit to be available. We will also be treating this survey as a pseudo pre-order page, so you can save a spot in line for when we officially start taking orders. And regarding future videos, I will continue to post major pedal update videos on this channel, but we have started a pedal lighting YouTube channel and an Instagram page where we will be more frequently posting pedal specific videos, tutorials, and other content. So definitely subscribe to those channels if you want to stay as up to date on this project as possible. So I hope this first look into version 2 was worth the wait. As always, I'm super interested in your feedback, and I'd love to know what you think of the new design in the comments down below. And if you consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel, that really helps me continue working on projects like this one. Thanks so much. Here we go. Beautiful crane shot.